Welcome to VoteProPot-Cast, brought to you by VoteProPot.com. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of VoteProPot-Cast. I'm Phil Adams.
I'm Jay Britton.
And I'm Andrew McCready's.
And today we're going to talk about how Trump's new budget affects D.C. cannabis laws. We're going to hear a story about cannabis and women's orgasms. So you want to stay tuned for that. Mm-hmm. The Department of Defense considers cannabis a threat to national security. Learn more about that one. The DEA wants some help differentiating between marijuana and hemp. Jay's going to give us the state-by-state rundown of pending cannabis legislation. But first, Jay, you've got a story about Colorado again, and they're seeking some volunteers for some interesting work. What do you got?
I think I got a job for you, Andrew. I think I got a job for Colorado Research. This is from High Times, A.J. Harrington. Colorado researchers are seeking volunteers to get high and drive. Researchers in Colorado are investigating the effects of cannabis on driving and are seeking volunteers to get high and drive for the study. Participants in the research will be paid for their time, but they'll have to bring their own weed to smoke, according to according to reports. So what they're trying to do is, now that weed's getting legal everywhere, and we have the issue with, obviously, driving under the influence. So one of the things they're doing is they've commissioned a study, they being Colorado, and they're having people drive straight, take a test, and do some different cognitive tests and written tests, and then get stoned and drive the same place, same route, and then do the test again. So they want to see how much THC really affects your driving skills. So
and get some real hard data behind it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
I read a study that has already been done on this, and what they found was people who had never smoked cannabis before, and when they smoked, it definitely affected their driving. I mean, because it was new to them. But the same study also found people who smoked regularly, it had little, if any, effect on them. And in fact, the study said, actually, the people after they got stoned drove a little better. I think mainly because they probably were concentrating more,
Right.
I know I drive slower.
Well, cannabis doesn't affect your reflexes like alcohol does. I mean, I'm not advocating. I don't think anyone should get stoned and get behind a wheel. But if you're medicating and you have low THC and it's, and maybe, you might feel a little bit, but you're taking it for chronic pain, then okay, you should be able to drive. And those people shouldn't be arrested, because they're taking something that's super low in THC and they're not really cognitively effective.
Right. Well, I think it'll be interesting to see how Colorado's findings mesh with the findings that you mentioned, Andrew, because, you can't have too much data on this stuff. And, differing methodologies can bring differing results, and the more you have, the better. I mean, research is the more the better. Yeah,
and right now, I think the big issue is how do police officers do a field sobriety test? We already know you can't do the blood test or the saliva test because you can test positive from smoking 2 weeks ago. A lot of jurisdictions just let the cops make up their mind. They have sole discretion. Yeah, you look stoned to me. You're coming in. In some states, which is really...
So it's a judgment call.
Yeah.
In the interview with Dr. Behrman last week, he talked about how the field sobriety tests when it comes to cannabis are complete BS, and you shouldn't agree to take them. Now, what he probably didn't mention is as soon as you say, no, I'm not going to take one, into the station you go. Mm-hmm. That's the way it is around here. From the stories I've heard about it. If you want to avoid getting arrested, or at least being taken in, you got to take a field sobriety test and you have to pass it. Otherwise, they're going to haul you in.
Right. I think the solution is really easy. What they do, they think the person is under the influence, put them in the back of the patrol car, unhandcuffed, leave a box of Twinkies and put like some Flintstones reruns. And if they sit there and laugh and eat the box of Twinkies, cuff them, take them to jail.
Cuff them. Book them, Dano.
And that is solid scientific methodology, I think.
But it's about as solid as what they're doing now.
That's right.
Probably.
Although I think you can look at some people and go, dude, you're stoned. Man, I can tell.
Yeah. I mean, no
come on, dude. You know. So in other words, if you're going to get high, call an Uber.
You know, impaired is impaired, and I think that's exactly right, Andrew. We don't advocate being driving while being impaired at all. But there's degrees, and use good judgment.
And medical patients that are using low THC products shouldn't be, because if they do come up with a test, those people will test positive. So what they need to do is come up with a test that tests for the level of THC. But man, that's going to be tough. Good luck on that.
That's going to be very difficult.
I don't know how they would do that, because if you're testing if someone smoked it, that's one thing. It might be residue in their mouth and esophagus. But if it's an edible, I mean, it doesn't leave any residue behind.
Right.
And now they got those suppositories. It's cannabis suppositories. I mean,
there's different kind of residue.
I mean, how do you test for that?
There is so much going on in cannabis legislative reform that you just have to keep informed and get involved. And one great way to start is to check us out at VoteProPot.com.
Or send us an email at VoteProPot@gmail.com. Leave us a message at 240-257-2441, and we'll play it on the show.
And please feel free to like, follow, and share, and stalk us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Just do a search for VoteProPot.
And speaking of leaving a message on our cannabis line, VoteProPot line, I think we did.
We got a pizza delivery order. I know that.
Yeah. We got a message from a gentleman that's really pertinent to what we talk about here. And I'm not going to yak. I'm just going to play it.
Hello. My name is Ryan. I am with the Coalition for a Safer Vanderbilt. In November, the voters of Michigan went to the polls and passed recreational marijuana with 56% support. The voters of Vanderbilt, Michigan, a little town in the tip of the mitt, passed it with support of 59% of their electorate, an even wider margin than the state. And still, the majority of the local village council voted to ban marijuana establishments inside of a town that overwhelmingly supported the proposal both in November and in person at special meetings of the village council. Thankfully, the authors of Proposal 1, Jamie Lowell especially, pushed to include a section in the new law that allows citizens to challenge these decisions made by local leaders simply by gathering signatures and putting the matter to a vote. A group of us in Vanderbilt did just that. We drafted an ordinance to set the number of marijuana establishments inside the village and gathered enough signatures to qualify the petition. We are headed to the polls August 6th in what is the first enactment of the civil rights referendum in the state. We will not be the last by any means. Already we have had quite a few individuals reach out to us from all over the state and ask for help in doing the same thing in their communities. We are optimistic the voters of Vanderbilt will head to the polls in August and have their voices heard. Democracy is a muscle, and when exercised properly, it only becomes stronger. Thank you for having us. Keep up the good fight.
Okay, this sounds like another example of states voting on reform and then city councils or state legislators going, well, we're still against it, so we're going to pass really horrible laws. So here's a case where they're going to go, we're going to vote to keep our city dry, which is okay. But when the majority of the people who live there don't agree with the city council, then the city council has to, accept the fact that that's what the majority of the people want. And we are living in a democracy, and the majority should rule. Yeah, and
their representatives should be representing them, right?
Right.
Well, that's the idea.
That's how it's supposed to work. Yeah.
So what's happening is that they put together this legislation in the city council Or am I reading it wrong?
No, Michigan voted
to legalize.
Adult. And this Vanderbilt is a small, and their little community said, no, we're not going to have it here. We're going to be a dry.
Okay, and I guess the answer is that's fine if that's what the people of Vanderbilt want, but clearly, according to what this gentleman is saying, is that's not what the people of Vanderbilt want. They have an overwhelming majority in favor of adult use.
Exactly.
Is that how I'm reading
Correct.
it?
Yeah, exactly. So Ryan has taken the initiative, him and others, to create a coalition to go out and get petitions signed and get it changed. So way to go, Ryan. I mean, that's exactly what we're preaching. Here.
Man, if more people are like him, this would be a better country. Yeah, hats off to him. He's doing a great job. And it sounds like the regulations were written up, or the legislation was written up well because it gave them the option to to appeal it.
That's a really important point.
Yeah. And really, this is the definition of grassroots activism. You know, we know that really nothing changes without people, like-minded individuals, getting involved and participating. And you think of advocacy as something that politicians do, that think tanks and lobbyists and people in suits in Washington do. But the fact is that making and changing laws is really the job of, drum roll please, we the people. Mm-hmm. And this gentleman from Michigan is doing exactly the kind of thing that we advocate all the time.
Way to go, Ryan.
Yeah.
Way to go, Ryan.
President Trump's new budget proposes that marijuana legalizations for D.C. will be loosened. Now, what happened when they legalized cannabis in D.C. through a ballot initiative? The thing about Washington, D.C. is instead of having a governor, it has the House. And the House of Representatives acts as like a overseer of the District of Columbia. So when the ballot initiative passed overwhelmingly, thank you, the response was, and it was led by Senator Andy Harris from the 1st District of Maryland. Now, what he came up and said, he tried to do whatever he could to block it. So what he said was he proposed legislation that said for D.C.'s city ordinances, I guess, that they could not spend any money allocated to them on setting up a legal for sale industry. So, but actually, the way it was stated, it sort of gave them a loophole where we'll just get money from somewhere else, not from this allocation. But then in 2017, Congress tightened it up even more and blocked that. Now, the new budget calls for allowing D.C. to have that loophole back. So now that has the opportunity in D.C. to set up a legal system.
So in other words, the loophole is that they're not going to fund it through this
federal money
funding mechanism for federal money. But if they can fund it from other means, then they can do it.
I mean, just application fees would carry the bulk of it. Mm-hmm. So
the bottom line is the District of Columbia is at the mercy of Congress when it comes to spending and allocating money for things, right? And they passed this law. Yeah. But Congress said, okay, yeah, it's legal now, but you know what? We're not going to give you money to do anything, right, Andrew? Is that how it works?
Right.
So the new budget, how does it change that? Exactly. I mean,
you
said there's a loophole.
What it does in 2017, they hammered down and said you can't use any money. You can't use any money to set up a legal system. But now it's back to you can't use any federal monies, and now they found a loophole that I think they're going to use. So we'll see. We'll see. I guess now with the Democratic Congress, they could do that. But before, with the Republican Congress, D.C. was not going to get any money or any help setting up a legal sales system.
So explain, Andrew, what the policy is in D.C. now. What's legal? What's not?
As it is now, you can grow up to 6 plants and give away 2 ounces to anyone legally.
But you can't go buy it.
But you can't buy it. So what was happening, there were places in D.C. where you go in, and for $50, you buy a pencil. And they gave you free weed with it.
Interesting. That's an expensive friggin' pencil, man.
Yeah. So
right,
we'll see.
Yeah, but weed is free.
DC is interesting because, for starters, DC is so small, and so which means they have to grow, cultivate, and sell all in the city limits, man. And
oh yeah, that's true.
Those of us who grew up in DC realize we're in. There's no fields. There's no place to. The only thing I can say, there is some land maybe down in like an Anacostia area around there in the southeast, southwest, where they might be able to, or there might be some old buildings that they could level, but they're not going to start leveling buildings.
Yeah.
One of the options I see for DC is our rooftop greenhouses.
Right.
I was just going to say rooftops.
So.
Well, one of the booming businesses that's come about in DC, and Andrew and I have talked about this, is subcontractors or contractors that are designing condos with little grow stations built within like a closet of the condo, right, Andrew?
With HVAC all hooked up, lights, everything.
And that's booming because all you can really do in DC is grow it. I mean, easily. You can find it, you can trade it, but like Andrew said, you can't go buy it at a dispensary anywhere. So yeah, you can buy a condo with a little closet converted. It's got the grow lights and the CO2 and everything you need, the fans, and pretty cool.
Seems to me you could set up a big greenhouse and lease out enough space for the folks to grow. However, what's the limit on the number of plants?
But it has to be within your residence.
Yeah, it has to be in your residence.
Oh, it has to be within your residence.
Well, that's how the law's written right now.
In California, they did something like that for medical patients. They had like co-ops where they'd get a grower who would grow for a bunch of patients. But although DC does have a medical system, so there are commercially licensed growers and processors and dispensaries.
Oh, there are?
Yeah, because medical's legal.
So, I know it's legal, but I don't understand the process of how you get it. I mean, there's not a dispensary.
For medical, there are dispensaries for medical.
Are there? Okay. I see.
And that's one of the reasons. That's another thing that it's not going to cost that much more to set it up because there's already sort of a system in place as far as getting permits to grow and licenses for dispensaries. That's all set up.
Cool.
So, DC's my hometown, and we live right outside of it, so we're always very conscious of what's going on there.
Well, there's another aspect of DC that is not quite as hospitable. And that is the Department of Defense. And according to this, according to this article on cannabis.net, it says the Department of Defense considers cannabis a threat to national security. And it's really a matter of people being in jeopardy of losing their security clearances through the DOD, Department of Defense, if they own any stocks or any marijuana companies. And it's not just owning a company, just owning stocks is enough.
If they invest in it.
In a particular case...
That sounds crazy.
In a particular case concerning a Department of Defense employee who lists his marijuana-related holdings on a financial disclosure statement during an annual security clearance check, he was notified that he had to get rid of his stocks. Now, he received a letter stating he was violating public trust by owning marijuana stocks. And this apparently is a grievous sin, according to the Department of Defense. The idea is that because this is a threat to national security by some strange stretch of the imagination, you can't get security clearances through the Department of Defense if you
just
have
for owning
any holdings.
Stocks.
Owning stocks.
That's nuts.
Right.
Or you'll lose your security clearance if they find out that you have them.
I mean, some lawyers got to be all over this.
Well, I mean, if you go for your security clearance renewal, and they see that you have them, you're going to have to divest, or you won't get react.
Even though you don't handle the cannabis, you have nothing to do with the operations, daily operations, and you have absolutely really nothing as far as the policies for the corporate policies for the company. You're just a stockholder. I mean,
that's nuts, man. There's got to be lawyers all over this. This has got to.
Well, I think you know what it is. You know what it is.
I mean,
it's not really. It's because it's obviously no danger to national security what stock you own. What it is if you're like supporting that industry is their problem because they think, well, if you're going to support something that we consider illegal, can we trust you? Is that what they're saying?
But it's a stock for
Or
crying
they're
out
saying
loud.
anyone who supports cannabis, we're doing our best to get rid of you. We're going to do our, I think the anti-marijuana people they're throwing stuff at the wall and just seeing what sticks.
Jeez.
Well, I think that's partly true. I think you're right on both scores to differing amounts. This is still against federal law to use, own, or sell cannabis or cannabis products. And DOD is an agency, department of the federal government. And so they feel the need to uphold that standard. But I think the reason behind the reason is probably more like what you say. There are still those in that sector of the government who feel that, marijuana is an evil thing, and people who are involved with it in any level are bad people, and we're going to root them out.
So what if you have an IRA and you've got a stock portfolio that you don't control, and your stockbroker has bought some little chunk of, some cannabis, some little group of stocks that are investing in cannabis businesses. You don't even know it, or you may not know it. That's just stupid.
Sounds like a gray area to me.
That's bullshit.
There's probably not a single investment firm out there right now that doesn't have people who are specializing in investing in cannabis industry. I can remember when I first started this, I approached a guy we went to high school with who now works for Morgan Stanley. And I approached him about financing, a business in Maryland. And he was going, man, our bosses tell us to stay away from it like a hot potato. We have nothing to do with it. And that was in 2014. And now they have a division that's specializing in it.
Wow.
Well, yeah, because guess what? There is money to be made.
That's right.
And I guess the Department of Defense doesn't really care about the money to be made at this point. So they are going to enforce the federal ban to the letter. And to them, that means you have to divest.
Okay, now Maryland Senate just unanimously passed a bill to ban the state police from denying firearms to medical marijuana users. Now,
you've talked about that a lot, Andrew.
Yeah, we have. Now, as it turns out, Senator Michael Hughes, a Republican, and Senator Robert Zorkin, a Democrat, proposed legislation that would instruct the Maryland State Police, who are in charge of issuing permits, to not interact with any medical marijuana patients and guns. So now apparently a few other states are following their suit.
Yeah, we did a story on it last week, remember?
Right. So, but apparently, it was unanimous. I mean, everybody voted for it. Which is, you're voting pro-marijuana and pro-gun. I mean,
yeah, that's
people
amazing.
On both sides of the aisle are going. If you would have voted against that, you would have had fucking enemies everywhere.
Well, just see, we can all get along.
Yeah, that's right. Andrew, recap the kind of gun thing again for those who didn't hear earlier
happens,
shows.
There's a federal form that you have to fill out when you fill out a firearm. It's the Firearms Transaction Record Form 4473. And it asks you if you use marijuana. And so if you check yes, you won't be allowed to get a gun. Now, people are thinking, well, I have a medical marijuana card, so I'm not using any controlled substances, which is the question. So I think it's worded, do you use any controlled substances, including marijuana? But then the form goes on to say the use and possession of marijuana remains unlawful under federal law, regardless whether or not it's legalized and decriminalized by the medical marijuana commissions of your state, whatever. This is one issue. I remember when I first heard it, I was like, gosh, I mean, who's going to be against it? I mean, that's crazy. The pro-gun people don't like it. The pro-cannabis people don't like it. Who's going to fight it? Who's going to fight
That's
it?
right.
So
that's right. You got people on both sides.
So I think that's what this is just going to, it's going to pass. They're going to pass these. And I think in some cases, if someone wanted to push it, they could probably, take it to court or appeal it. But I don't know if anyone's going to do that. But there's so many ways around it. You can. I was talking to a former Frederick City police officer who now works at the local dispensary, and we were talking about this. And he says what some people are doing, they're starting trusts, and the trusts own the guns. So and though you might own the trust, that's not the same as having as owning a gun. And apparently these trusts enables you to like even get like silencers and semiotic weapons. I mean, so it's in a way, to a gun collector, the trust is sort of a good thing. So we'll see.
All right, here's a story, gentlemen. Marijuana really does give women better orgasms. A new study finds cannabis leaves users twice as likely to report sexual satisfaction. Now, this is in the Daily Mail. A new study that analyzed reports from hundreds of women, both pot smokers and not pot smokers, has found that marijuana use prior to sex doubles the chances of having more satisfying orgasm. Exactly why marijuana seems to improve the sexual experience is still somewhat of a mystery. But over the years, scientists have come up with several possible explanations. It has been postulated that it leads to improvement in sexual function simply by lowering stress and anxiety. Researchers explain in a new paper published to the Journal of Sexual Medicine.
Wow.
There you go.
So it relieves the stress and anxiety. I guess that makes a lot of sense.
Well, I think what's interesting is the numbers. The women they interviewed, that twice as many had high-quality orgasms when they used marijuana than when they didn't. So it's not just a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, the anxiety factors are, I mean, I remember my first sexual experience was very scary. I mean, I was all alone,
So all this time it was the weed. I thought it was me. Damn.
Damn it. It's just the weed, man. Sorry.
So there you go, ladies.
I'm not really sure about this. I'd like to collect some more data and some information on my own.
I think we should.
I think you should do a double-blind study on this.
Double-blind. Yeah. All right.
Well, it only makes sense because it relaxes you. I did a story on this before, and then what they're doing is they're getting these strains that are high in CBD and low and moderate amount of THC. So instead of like 18, 20%, it's like 13 or 14%. So it really relaxes you, but you don't get like wasted.
Paranoid.
So it really loosens up your inhibitions a little bit, and it relaxes your body.
That's what it said.
You're able to concentrate,
It's one of the things they mentioned as a major factor was the inhibitions, that your inhibitions were lowered. So anyway, interesting stuff. We'll keep that in mind.
Well, going back to the federal government here, the Drug Enforcement Administration, aka DEA, is got a little problem. According to the Farm Bill of 2018, which federally legalized industrial hemp and its derivatives, there is a threshold of THC content that distinguishes between what is hemp and what is considered marijuana. And I believe it's 0.3% is considered marijuana. And as such, it is federally controlled. But you can't tell that just by looking at the plant. The Drug Enforcement Administration is looking for a device or some sort of tool that can use to determine whether a plant is a federally legally controlled marijuana plant or a legal hemp plant. So, because they can't tell. It seems to me the administration, the agency of the federal government that wants to control drugs doesn't really know what a drug is and what it isn't.
Well, it's kind of difficult to tell. I think a lot of this came from the truck driver they pulled over, and he had like 50 or 100 gallons of CBD oil, and they arrested him and took him in, and he's going, I was on my way to a processor, I'm just delivering it, and they're going to be making, lotions and soaps and health and beauty stuff. And that guy, that's ridiculous that he could face, years in jail.
Is he still facing years in jail?
I don't know. The article I read that
what was he doing that was illegal?
He was transporting cannabis oil. Although it was even though CBD oil, and there was CBD below 0.03% THC. Yeah. So, but how do you tell?
Well, according to this,
you need a device. Yeah. Well, it's like a breathalyzer for driving while impaired
for a plant.
You can't. How do you test it? I don't know.
Well, according to the DEA, They sent out a notice. The device, quote, it must be portable and rugged enough to be used in non-laboratory environments or ambient conditions. All products shall be the most current and up-to-date model revision available at the time of delivery. Anticipated maximum quantities to be purchased will be based on evaluation results and agency needs. So they're putting out, it's kind of an RFP, you know,
right, for bids,
you know, device, manufacturers and designers.
If you think about it right now, they could take that to a lab and have it tested easily. So
that's what I wonder why the guy's in trouble.
The technology is there. It's not like the breathalyzer, which there is nothing to test a breath for cannabis amount.
Yes, but I think they need something to be used in the
that's
field.
what I'm saying. But the technology is there. They just have to miniaturize it and make it portable.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't, and also it may not necessarily have to be handheld. It could just be in their trunk, a little box in your trunk, and you just stick the sample in there. Or it might be some kind of like a litmus test. It might be something really easy. It could be even cheap.
Just like a litmus paper, yeah.
Yeah, they have these field tests for...
They just need to test for that 0.0%, 0.03% THC. That's the only information they need.
You know what would save them a lot of money? If they just legalized it.
Yeah, there you go. Well, that ain't going to happen.
God, that's a great idea.
It would save the taxpayer a ton of money.
You know, we should do a podcast about that.
I'm sure there's some research labs, there's some engineers out there right now working on this, and it's only a matter of time.
Man.
Because this could be huge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, huge. You're right.
Because also, personally, I wouldn't mind having a home device that I could test the amount of THC and CBDs for that matter.
That would be cool.
Because what I'm working on is like when I decarboxylate, when I make edibles, I want to know, you know, should I keep it in there for 20 minutes or 40 minutes? So you do them both and then test them and see which had a better result.
Good idea.
Yeah, you almost want to find out who the company is that gets the bid or gets the contract and invest in that company.
No shit.
You know, a company, a pot stock for a company that is doing business with the DEA, that's going to be money.
Another example of why this industry is going to be like the internet. There's going to be so many ancillary businesses that you don't even think of now.
Can't even think of them now.
And they're going to be freaking huge in 10 years, you know?
Well, Levi Strauss made more money than anyone on the 1849 gold rush.
Yeah, on the gold rush.
He made more money than the miners.
Than the gold miners,
and he's still making money.
Pants.
Recently in Missouri, police raided a gentleman's hospital room. Now, he's in the hospital with stage 4 cancer, with terminal cancer. The security guard said that he smelled marijuana and called the police. The police get there, and there's a videotape of this online. The police get there, and they start searching his room. And he goes, well, do you have a search warrant? They go, no, we don't need one because it's private property. It's a hospital. And he's going, well, I'm not going to give you consent to search. So... Meanwhile, there are two cops. One's ransacking his room, and the other one, or searching his room. Not really ransacked, but he was going through everything. The other cop's sort of folding his arms, leaning against the wall, saying, guys, you know, we're just doing our job. We got called. And then the nurse and a doctor come in, and they're saying, what's going on? Meanwhile, this patient's got pretty stressed out. And the patient's going, listen, I admit to using cannabis, but it's legal in this state, and it's not here. It's at home. You know, I didn't bring it in. And when I do it, I do the capsules. I'm not smoking, you know. And it seems to me if he had been smoking, you would still smell it, you know. But
yeah, I'm shocked that they would search his place and everything if they didn't have any reason to.
Well, no, if they just cause. I don't know. I think if I was the cop, I would have said, well, I don't smell anything. I'm not going to go and, you know, this guy's freaking dying.
Yeah.
I'm going to go harass this guy. But the other cop would say, listen, man, we're just doing our jobs. And I'll tell you one thing. If we haven't found anything, we're going to leave here in a minute. But if we do find something, all I'm going to do is write him a ticket. We're not going to take him in. Hell no. I'm not. He's going, man, there's no fucking the cops going, look at me. I'm not going to fucking take this guy in. I mean, he's on his deathbed. What the fuck, you know?
Unbelievable.
And,
so this is really all on the security guard being kind of a dickhead.
Policy, maybe. I don't know. But this is a video making the rounds. And I watched it and I thought about it and going, well, it's sort of just a train wreck of errors, I think, you know. I think maybe the hospital could have handled it better. The security guard sitting there, you know, feeling so self-righteous. Why do people call the police over stuff that's really sort of benign? Now, if the whole floor was reeked up, you know, I could understand. But none of the doctors or nurses or the police, no one at all said, I smell marijuana, that's why I'm here. So,
right. Well, how do you figure how some people do silly things they do?
Yeah, so I think it's just I don't think really the security guard, what probably happened, a visitor came to visit the guy, smoked a joint right before he walked in. Security guard walked by, smelled the weed on that guy, thinking it's coming from the room, And meanwhile, the patient is just, had no fault.
And there's always those guys who you give them a little bit of authority and it goes to their head and they got to be
It's like mall cop syndrome.
You're right.
Well, since 9/11, we've been sort of drilled into my head. I remember when I lived in New York, I was on the subway. If you see something, say something, so.
Well, that's true, but it doesn't say if you smell something, say something.
If you smell weed on a guy's clothes, call the feds.
Yeah, and I've known plenty of security guards in my life, and they're mostly really good guys.
Yeah.
But there's always those few who got to be dicks.
Yeah, so if you see something...
Paul Blart.
If you see someone that looks like it caused someone's loss of life or property, call the police. But if it's some guy smoking a joint, really, leave the cops alone. I think most cops really don't want to be involved. They really don't want you to call them.
No. Well, Jay is going to give us a state-by-state rundown of what is happening in the world of cannabis legislative reform. What do you got, Jay?
Well, I'll tell you, there's every week I mention this, but there's so many. I try to scale it down and run through them real quick here. In case your state's on the list, you'll know what's going on. Start with Alaska. Alaska is officially the first state to license on-site marijuana consumption at cannabis stores. Now, with this, I'd like to make a correction. I was reading a story last week about Colorado and some legislation. Andrew corrected me. I was under the impression that you would be able to get a license at, different places, but like Andrew said, it's for dispensaries. So essentially, Alaska is the first one. Adults 21 and over can buy regulated and taxed cannabis from licensed storefront dispensaries in a growing number of U.S. states. But until Alaska Lieutenant Governor Kevin Meyer, a Republican, signed new regulations into law on Tuesday last week, no state has been in the business of issuing permits authorizing on-site consumption. So if you're in Alaska, very soon, I think by the end of the year, there will be certain dispensaries where you can go in and actually sample. So that's cool.
All right.
Well, also, the thing about this on-premise use is it's not just going to be smoked. It's not like they're smoking joints. I mean, there might be an outdoor area where you can go out and smoke it, but indoor it's all going to be vaping or
that's true.
Concentrates or edibles or especially the infused
drinks.
It's going to be the infused stuff, I think.
Be interesting to see where that. It'll be interesting to see where that goes. Like, how does that evolve into other things? Because, you guys have been to dispensaries, and I mean, I don't really see going in there and saying, "Hey, I'm going to hang out here and."
I don't know. I mean, I can see going to some jazz clubs, where people are smoking.
Yeah, but that's not what they're proposing yet. That's what I mean by evolving. It'd be nice to see if that eventually happens. If dispensaries become much more than a dispensary,
they should have an ability, like at dispensaries, not to give every patient, every customer a taste, but they should be able to have samplings and tastings on premise so people can go and learn about it. You should be able to have permits where you could, if you have a business, and you could add cannabis to it. Like, I think down south, man, there's some caterers that do barbecue on a spiritual level. It's so incredible.
Oh my God!
Right.
Yeah.
So imagine having a caterer that came and set up his truck and like a little, a little reefer bar.
Oh man, yeah, that'd be fun.
That'd be awesome.
I'd go to that party.
I'd be there. Absolutely. That's cool.
It's going to help the economy in so many ways. That's just an example.
Let me move forward here. New Hampshire High Court ruling: cost specific to state-sanctioned use of medical cannabis may be eligible to reimbursement under workers' compensation laws, according to a ruling by the Supreme Court of New Hampshire. So that's a step in a great direction, and we want to see that in more states. So in other words, cannabis will be eligible for under workman comp laws to pay for your cannabis for treatment. New Mexico, we talked about last week. They had a bill to for state-run dispensaries, for the same thing we were talking about, and that is a proposal that would make New Mexico the first U.S. state to set up government-operated marijuana stores. Appears dead in the current legislation session.
Great.
So, that died. Yeah. Sorry, New Mexico. Get out there, New Mexicans, and let them know that that's bullshit.
Absolutely.
We're back to South Dakota, guys. Republican Governor Kristi Noem has vetoed the legislation, House Bill 1191, which sought to comport state law with newly enacted provisions of the Farm Act. The measure sought to permit state regulators to license farmers to commercially cultivate industrial hemp and sought to regulate certain products derived from hemp, like CBD extracts and so forth. She vetoed it. So there you go. Shocker, huh?
Yeah.
Good old South Dakota. And I got one more, and it's more bad news. Idaho. We were talking about Idaho last week, weren't we, guys, or the week before?
Well, they're going to be the last state in the union to do anything.
He said we'll all three of us be in the ground by the time Idaho does anything.
Yeah.
Well, listen to this big
resting
news.
next to the potatoes.
Yeah. Activists have begun efforts to qualify a medical cannabis and hemp ballot initiative for the 2020 ballot. So there you go. Idaho might surprise us, guys.
Well, yeah, that's progress.
Yeah.
So folks in Idaho, folks in New Mexico, and I guess Alaska, you're pretty much set. South Dakota, find out who is making these decisions, where they're being made. One great way to do that is go to VoteProPot.com. Go to our Take Action page, and you'll find all kinds of resources for finding out who are the players in this, when these reform things are being debated, and where. You can contact your local officials, contact your senators, congressmen, all kinds of things that you can do to get involved and make your voice heard to those at the state level who are making these decisions. Check it out at VoteProPot.com.
And send us an email at VoteProPot@gmail.com.
Please like and follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Just do a search for VoteProPot.
Wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. But here I am in New York City, hiding out in Central Park, getting kidnapped by the police today sometime before dark. But I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. The judge looked down upon me, frowned. He said, "Kid, get on your way. Just don't start out your morning with espresso and a J." I said, "I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day." Hitched on out to Portland, caught a ride up to BC, took the bus over to the neighborhood to have a bowl with my coffee. Now I'm up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day. Smoking good old Sensimilla at the beginning of the day.